Hi there, my name is Ralph Angelillo. You're watching Drumshare News with Jarah Jane.
Hey there guys, you're watching Drumshare News, the place where I bring you the news that you might have missed out on. And today we have Mr. Ralph Angelillo, drummer and the Ralph Angelillo International Drum Fest producer, here in the studio with Steph and I. And we were wondering about we have a whole bunch of questions for you actually today, so I hope you're ready to chit-chat with me.
Well, it's a pleasure. First of all, congratulations on your show, on your video that you put out every once in a while.
Yes. It's every 2 weeks, but...
Every 2 weeks?
Yes, every 2 weeks, but soon will be, starting October, it will be every week. I was going to save that, but I told you guys, now I'm telling you guys, so it'll be once a week. So congratulations on that, because you're giving, drummers a lot of ideas, and you're doing a lot for them. So that's the way we see it. Thank you, and thank you so much for watching the show. Also, I know that you watched the show, so thank you so much.
I do.
Thanks for that. Appreciate it. Am I turning red? I often turn red on camera, don't I? Okay, so Ralph, going back to the beginning of your career, I would like to know a little more about the Megatons. Megatons was a band that you started with friends, or how did that start?
Yeah, I was 17. That's way back in '62, and we got together, a bunch of friends and myself. Guitar players, bass players, partly vocal. I was the drummer then, just starting to play drums. And the guys, we were just getting out of high school, just finishing high school. We got together. And we found out we had the same taste in music. At that point, they call it surf music today.
Okay.
And the Ventures, the Champs, all the Surfaris, and you remember Wipeout?
Yes.
And we used to play all those tunes. And when we saw that we had the same taste in music, we got a group going. And we called it the Megatons.
Okay.
Les Megatons in French.
Les Megatons.
It was a group from Quebec City. And then the next 4 years were crazy, because in 2 months, we were recording an LP. We got somebody in Montreal that came to see us, and we had that big Fender sound. The Fender guitars, Fender basses. I had Ludwig drums. We had all the right instruments to sound like the Ventures and groups like that. So we started practicing, and we ended up in Montreal recording. And inside of 2 years, we had 3 long-playing records. We used to call them LPs then. And the first one just went up. Big success. People were buying the records then. And we're talking about 1962, 63. So when you're a kid, when you're 17, 18 years old, and you're touring with a popular band, even if it's instrumental music, it doesn't get better than that, but you don't think of the future, And so we ended up in the States. We toured Quebec, Ontario. We did a 9-month tour in the United States. And that's when the group broke up in 1965.
Okay.
And it's just that 6 guys on the road. We were 6 at the end, and 6 guys on the road. A lot of musicians will relate to this. Is that you start getting lonesome for home, and you start arguing and fighting and stuff like that. It happened to us too.
Too many people on the bus.
Well, that's it.
Getting hot on the bus.
The only thing I can say is that the most beautiful years of my when I was a teenager, I have memories that you can't buy that, And then the Beatles came along and they changed the whole thing.
They changed history.
That's for everybody. The Beatles, they just changed everything. So we did our little share at the beginning, and great memories.
You said, you toured with known bands? Other known bands?
Yeah, well, we even accompanied, when we were in the States, we accompanied Dionne Warwick. Yeah, I don't know if you
Of course I know.
Okay, we were in clubs where on Wednesday night they'd have a guest star. And we had Tony Orlando. Remember Tony Orlando and Don?
I'm sorry.
You know, no?
I'm sorry.
You're too young for this.
And, I love that. He said I'm too young.
Dionne Warwick.
But Dionne Warwick, I love.
Was what's her name? Her aunt.
Was it?
She died not long ago. But anyways, Dionne Warwick was a big star. We toured with the Platters. We toured with groups like the. All the 60s, beginning of the 60s groups and the Four Seasons, Frankie Valli and the Four Seasons.
Really?
And it gave us, we ended up with more experience because we just had to, work and play.
Yeah.
And even though we were self-taught, we didn't read music. Sometimes a star would arrive with a pile of music, and we're looking at the music. What's that?
What is that? Yeah.
And then you have to go through this to accompany this star, and then sorry about that.
Yeah.
But we did it all ad lib, So, so it was. When I think of it today, it's the best experience you could have for a young band.
Well, definitely.
And
of course,
it's not changed today. It's the same thing, but it's just got bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
And there are thousands of musicians more than then,
Yes.
It's a big world now, that was my good time. A good time.
It sounds 60s, like it was good time, and it's a nice time on the road, and it's an absolutely nice experience to be able to.
We were the type of group that pulled a U-Haul in back of our cars, and our cars were like almost touching the road, And I'll remember once we were coming from Quebec to Montreal to play a gig, and the bass drum rolled out of the U-Haul and rolled on to the Route 20.
But it wasn't locked. Someone hadn't locked.
No, it was badly closed. And my bass drum is rolling, and it's and it was still in good shape after.
Oh my God! Rocking and rolling.
But geez, my bass drum, my Ludwig drum rolling on the road.
No.
So this happened to us, and a lot of other little anecdotes. That. Too long to
Yeah, we'd need to take up the whole internet to be.
Yep.
I have another question though. We're going to move forward and we're going to talk about the Drums Etc. magazine. I'd like to know a little more about that. I know that you. What was your what were you doing?
Okay, the story, we're talking about the end of the 80s and... 88, 89.
That's when
the magazine
started.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not Drums, etc. We had Musiciens Québécois.
Oh, see?
Quebec
this
musician
is new for
first in French only.
Okay.
And I started that in my basement as a graphic artist. I had a drawing table, no computers. We used to paste all of the articles and little bits and pieces. I did that. And then I had to move to Montreal from Quebec City, and then my partner he was in Montreal, Serge Gamache. We got together and we formed sort of a great team because I was the artist. When you're the artist, the business part doesn't count, but you need it.
Yeah.
You need the business part. Sales was the business part. He was the accountant. He'd tell me, well, you can't spend there, you can't spend there. So you learn it as you're going along. And Musiciens Québécois, we found out that when we wanted to have advertising, like from the States, they'd see us as a regional magazine.
Okay.
They wouldn't see it. There's Canadian Musician magazine, it just has the name. Mm-hmm. But Quebec for the Americans was regional. Okay. So what we did, we changed the name to Music, etc. And that was the first one, Music, etc.
Music, etc. Okay.
Yeah. And we added later on, Drums, etc. was the same magazine, but you'd flip it upside down, and it would be the other magazine.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
But then we added, it was bilingual.
Mm-hmm.
Complètement bilingue, and across Canada.
Okay.
So why? Because the market was limited, you know. I mean, you're in Canada with a population that's not even the size of California, you know. So you have to look at that. So you say, we'll put out a magazine that's going to please a lot of musicians, especially students, because we were in all the schools in Canada, colleges, universities, name it, you know, high schools, and music stores. And the purpose of the magazine was to motivate youth, young musicians that needed information. I mean, forget about the internet those days, you know, the internet was just starting out. And so you needed a magazine to be able to read either in English and French in Canada to find out, you know, who's making this, where does this drum company come from, you know, what are these cymbals, you know, what are these gadgets and everything. So we used to do that in the magazine. So, and then after a while we separated both magazines. Music, etc. was for all the other instruments, and My Baby was drums, etc., because I'm a drummer. So I think 8 or 9 years with drums, etc., and it was a good success. I think both magazines together we published for about 27 years, wow, which was great.
Yes. Wow.
And then, but we ended up with the 2013-2014 recession. And then people started cutting budgets and everything. So we said, well, that's it for us. You know, we'll sort of wait a while. But magazines started disappearing because of websites, you know,
Definitely.
And so things like that, you know. So we were all okay with that, but it's just you have to keep on following the trends and
to keep up.
What's going on. Yeah.
And these magazines were free.
They were free magazines. They were
drum shops and
you know, financed by publicity only. You know, and you'd have a drum company, cymbal company. If we're talking about drums, etc. Drumsticks. But then you had to work with the companies and show their product. And then you'd have articles on all the up-and-coming musicians or drummers, you know. And so 27 years, it's a good run. And we saw other competition, you know, a bit everywhere in the world, you know, dropping their magazine as well, you know. So it's not what it was.
Times have changed.
So that's for the magazine. That's you know, I was the editor-in-chief for a while. And then I gave the job to Bruce Whittet, who was a good friend of mine, great musician in Ottawa. Okay. And then we had Franck Camus. At the end, it was Franck Camus that was the editor. And we sort of switched from one person that was very competent to the other to be able to take care of the what do you call it? The contents of the magazine. Okay. Then I ended up going to the trade shows and selling ads. That was my job.
Okay.
Know? Yeah. So that's why I'm in that crazy music business. You know?
But this magazine it's still available, but on the internet, is it?
Well, it used to be. It used to be. Not anymore.
I saw.
We had both. We had print and internet.
But the drums, etc. I saw. I just saw a little while ago, 2016. Right? Was it like? Because I just saw a Facebook page, drums, etc. And it's just last
you know,
2016.
on one of my Facebook sites, I keep showing souvenirs of the magazine covers. You know, and. Because we had quite a few great musicians on the covers. Yeah, I noticed it.
You've been posting some.
And we're very proud to bring those things out. And those musicians, some of them really made it. You know, others, you know, they quit, or others are still there working with bands and everything. And I think we've contributed to careers, you know, with the magazine. Even today, without the magazine, kids that are in college, you know, they come over to me and they say, Mr. Angelillo or Ralph, you know, you say, well, what do we do now, you know? Yeah. You know, and I'm scratching my head. What do I tell them?
I want to help them. Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. They're coming to me. Yeah.
It's not complicated. It's not a complicated thing. It's that you're a good musician if you've gone through college, university, but you don't have any gigs. I mean, you can't quit. You put a lot of energy into learning. So my brother Perry is a good example, and I give them that story, is that my brother Perry is a drummer. He's been a drummer for about 30 years in Quebec City, and it took him 20 years to leave his grocery. He was a grocery clerk.
Okay, yeah.
You know, but he never quit drumming. So I said, you guys, until you get there, find a job. Find another job, you know, but don't quit drumming. Make an arrangement, you know, with your boss, you know, say weekends I can't be at the store, you know, or wherever. Go work at McDonald's, you know, but don't quit your drums.
Yeah, you gotta still eat while you're, you still gotta pay the bills and keep moving.
You know, that's what it's all about, forward. You know. I mean, no money, you don't go anywhere, you know. It's we all know that, you know. And it's but when you've got the heart and soul into your instrument, you know, the drumming, any instrument for that fact, you know. But I'll come back to drumming because that's
what we're here for.
What I do. You know, it's a passion. It's not just. Some people say, well, you're playing, you know, you're having fun. But it's not just that, you know, it's a passion. It's coming from far deep in yourself, you know, so you must never quit. And you've got a lot of friends that are in the same situation. So you get together, form bands, you know, and then one day it clicks. All of a sudden it sounds good together, you know, and that's what it's all about. Then you're all proud to be able to present your group. Say, I'm drumming with this group, you know. It's so. And
it's such a great feeling.
What I tell students and young drummers, this is advice. I think there's not one week goes by where I don't tell somebody, never quit. You know, it's your passion. You don't quit, but you know, make it happen. Yeah, I think that's the main thing.
I think quitting eventually will lead you to hurting in the future because you can feel when you've lost out on something, and you don't want to quit. Keep playing those drums.
You never quit.
So now we're gonna
look at me, an old guy. You know,
you don't quit. You just like the Energizer Bunny. You keep on going. Boom, boom, boom. It's true. And he was a drummer too, the Energizer Bunny.
Yeah, well, that's one of my heroes. You know.
So we're going to be now talking about the Drum Fest, the Ralph Angelillo International Drum Fest. I would like to know a few things, actually. So the Drum Fest has been around for a few decades. What was that year that it hit and you started? And can you let us in on a little on how the development, how that happened?
Well, it's very simple. In my case, anyways, for a lot of people will say, well, how'd you do it, you know? Of course, I had help. I had a partner then, you know.
And this is in
1993.
Sorry, 1993. Okay.
Okay, 1993. We had the magazines and everything, and I knew there were other festivals in the world. You know, Modern Drummer. There were a couple of festivals in Europe, you know, and so on. Australia, it's still there, you know, Australia. And but I never saw these festivals live, but I could imagine what they were. And we didn't have YouTube to see everything that's going on at that point, you know. Yeah. So one day I was invited by Luc Boivin, who's a percussionist in Montreal, and he teaches in one of the universities. And Luc says, come and see our end of the year show with the students. And the teachers are going to play with them. You know, the Paul Brochu, Paul Brochu was there. Okay. Luc Boivin, Pierre Hébert, a great drummer in Quebec. So they're all there with the students, and it's their end of the year concert. And he says, come on over. And it was a brand new hall. It was La Salle Pierre Mercure in Montreal. So I go there one night, and I go and see this. And I was so impressed with the show, with the venue, the sound, the whole thing, that the next day I put $2,000 on the first Drum Fest.
The little light bulb turns on.
Yeah, it was exactly like that, you know.
Really?
I put $2,000. I said, I'm going to have a Drum Fest in the fall. My partner almost killed me, you know, but that's it, you know. I was so sure of myself, you know. But I remember it was in December, beginning of December, because we couldn't get November or October. We had 1993 was our first, and it was called the Montreal Drum Fest, of course. And we ended up 21 years later with one of the biggest festivals in the world.
Wow. It just grew from there.
It's year one was a success, you know. A lot of companies have said we'll wait and see the second year, you know.
Okay.
The sponsors, and with reason, you know, and then we had the usual arguments with the drum shops in town, and I don't mention any names, you know, the usual arguments, you know, well, why are you doing the drum fest and not us, you know, and stuff like that, you know. So, but I'm hard-headed. I've got a hard head, so I said, well, you become VIPs at our festival. Okay. We're not going to leave you out, you know. So it has to be for everybody has to benefit from a festival. It's not the jazz fest, you know. We don't look that high, you know. We're a drum fest, and you have to know your limitations when you're doing this. But then we got all the big stars, you know, one after the other for 21 years.
That's amazing.
You know, it's
and they're still coming in there. They're still, the big stars are still coming in. They're
still coming, but I've gained. This brings us to Quebec. I mean, the festival I have now is that after 27 years in Montreal, I moved back to my hometown, which is Quebec City. And a lot of people, they see my name, they say, well, he's from Italy. No, I'm not at all. You know, I'm from Quebec City, you know. It's just a name.
It just sounds like you're from Italy.
My grandparents are from Italy, you know. Yeah. So the Quebec Drum Fest, you know, after that recession.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Why you had stopped for a while in Montreal?
We stopped 2 years. Okay. First of all, it was 1 year because the industry told us the budgets are not there, and you have to respect that because they finance a lot of the artists, you know, and they want to be there. But when the budgets go down, they tell you, you know, you have to work with the industry. You don't work against or side by side. It's with. And the big thing is that when they told me that the budgets are down, you have to go along with it. You say, well, then we went into a big disappointment for a lot of people is that no festival in 2013.
I remember that was the first festival I was supposed to attend, and when I found out there was none, I was so sad.
And I had booked part of it, you know, and but finally 1 year goes by, 2014 goes by, it's the same thing.
I know, I
Recession's
remember that one
not
too.
over. It was a tough year, you know, and I'd go to the trade shows just the same, you know, and they tell me the budgets are going to come back, you know, and so on, you know, because you have to respect that. And so I moved back to my hometown, and normally I'm supposed to retire, you know. You move back and you say, well, now, you know,
I did what I did, and
you're in the autumn of your life, you know.
I like that.
But I don't believe in that, you know. I say if you're in good shape, and
your heart's still in it, and your mind's still in it.
You know, you do it.
Yes,
you keep on going, you know.
Yeah.
And so in Quebec City, I walked into the Périmocam, which is the venue we're in, and that's one of the most beautiful venues.
Definitely, it's
that we have in Quebec province.
Yes, it's beautiful.
And I visited the stage, the backstage, the hall, and I said, "This is what I'm doing." You know.
Suddenly, that little light bulb went back up, and
the light bulb went was very bright. You know, and I came back home. And I said, I'm going to have another drum fest in Quebec City. And then people started saying, well, why Quebec? You know, what's wrong with Montreal? You know?
That was my next question.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you something. Montreal is, as much as I love Montreal when everything's going well, you know, not with the cones everywhere. But
driving around
you know, when you're
Montreal.
27 years here, you learn you're part of the city. So the big problem was, you know, it's you say you look at it's not a bit like hockey, like when we used to have the Nordiques de Québec. You know, there was like a rivalité and in English.
Rivalité.
La rivalité entre les Canadiens de Montréal et les Nordiques.
Is that it?
Rivalry.
The rivals?
Where people in Quebec would say, well, we're a better team,
yes.
you know, and
Okay,
Montreal Canadiens are better. Yeah. And then when we had the games between both, there was fireworks, you know, it was always good.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with that because Quebec is much smaller than Montreal, but it's not small enough to put on a festival.
Right.
I think only in Quebec City, there are about 600 drummers. That's a lot for a town like Quebec.
For us, yeah, okay.
600. And then I said...
You're talking Quebec, yes, city, the city.
Pardon?
600 for the city itself.
For the city and the outskirts, you know.
Okay.
Let's say about 600, I calculated that, you know. And they're not all working, but it's a bit the same story everywhere, you know. But they're all drummers with passion, you know, and... So I said, why not Quebec City? And people would ask me, why not? How come you canceled Montreal? Well, maybe my thing was, let's wait and see what happens, you know. The city, we started having problems with the venue, you know, in Montreal. We had little problems here and there. So we decided to quit altogether.
Okay.
But then when I got into Quebec City, I found out that it's a very lively town. It has nothing to do with a small town where nothing's happening. It's got a major summer festival, Festival d'été de Québec.
Yes.
It's one of the biggest in Canada. You've got big shows. We have the Videotron Center, where if you see Lady Gaga in Montreal, you see her the next day she's in Quebec.
There,
you know,
yes, okay.
It's a town where people. They live the arts much more than Montreal. Montreal, it's because there's so much happening at the same time.
Yes.
So you do something in Quebec, and all of a sudden it grows. You know, so I tell people, I said, why not? That's one of my mottos. Why not? You know, you do it in Quebec City, but do it right.
And it's also it's like a fresh new start too. I guess it would. I would feel that you would feel that it's a new start. It's something different, and you know there was a pause between Montreal.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
You know, 2-year pause.
And then when you're, you know, some people that are, of course, are negative people everywhere. You know, I'm looking at our cameraman.
Our camera guy. Hi, camera guy.
No, I'm not saying negative for you there. Some people are...
And by the way, we're looking down on the ground. We're keeping him down on the ground, the camera guy.
Yeah. Everybody, in every society, you know, if you have a society of musicians, there's always a negative one that's going to come up and say, well, it's not going to work, you know.
You got to let those
you don't want
set them
aside.
You got to...
say, well,
you know,
go back home and do your thing. I'll do mine. So that's it's the way of thinking. And... you say, well, let's try it at least, you know, and I got a lot of support from the venue, from the venue. I know all the people there already, whereas in Montreal, they were more like...
Guys, this is the first time it happens to me. For some reason, the camera just died on us. So we've been talking for a little while here, and we're back. And we want to continue on about what we were just talking about here. And back to you, Ralph.
Okay, you were asking me about the why Quebec City compared to Montreal. And just to make it very simple, is that when I arrived in Quebec City, after 27 years in Montreal, I found a whole new town. It was a different culture, a different way of doing things, and the town is very well and alive. You know, it's very, it lives culture. You know, you say that in French, vit la culture. Quebec is the place where you can go to little clubs, you know, and see a lot of great bands, you know, and of course Montreal too has clubs. But Quebec surprised me in the number of little venues, you know, presenting. You can see there was, I remember a couple of years ago, Trilog Gurtu was one of the best Indian drummers from India.
Okay.
And he spent the whole week in Quebec City. He had one gig, but he spent the whole week playing with other musicians in clubs. And nobody knew about it.
Okay.
And he's a big star in the world, you know, and Trilog Gurtu. And it just shows you that people love Quebec. And again, I always say, why not? You know, let's try it. And the venue's so good. And don't forget, Quebec City is the oldest town in North America. You know, it's something like 418 years, something like that. So you're right in the old town. You know, if it rains like last year, you know,
this is kind of cold last year.
Takes a little something away. But we'll have sunshine this year.
Yes, we're calling for sunshine.
So Quebec, I rediscovered my town too. You know, I photograph a lot. You know,
sure, yes.
I've seen things that I never saw when I was a kid there. You know, and it's you think you're in a little town in Europe. You know, and for the tourists, that's the way they see it.
It does feel that way. Yes,
that's the way they see it. You know.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you about our lineup. We're going to get back to the Drum Fest here, and the lineup. Do you, off the top of your head, could you give us a few names here? Who are we going to be seeing?
Yeah, there's one thing I had to say though in the interview is that very short.
Yeah. Is
that I use my name in the logo, and there was a reason for that. Yes. Is that when you start a new drum festival, if you call it the Quebec Drum Festival, the industry, they see not another festival.
Yeah.
You know, if they see your name is there,
Ralph Angelillo,
without any pretension, yes. You know, it's just that you're known.
Yes.
It gives you a break, you know.
Definitely.
They'll say, well, he knows how to do a festival, you know. So that's what happened.
Yep.
The lineup this year, I try to book with the companies. You know, contrary to what a clinic in a drum shop would be, where they just want the windmill. You know, I call them windmills. I won't mention any names, but the drummers who acrobatics and everything, yes. the great drummers that can do everything. You know, they just want them. At our festival, we have a combination of big stars, but also up and coming drummers,
which is totally interesting.
It's
yes.
and it gives hope to a lot of younger drummers. They say, well, we can make it too, you know, at Drumfest, you know, but they're chosen because of their talent. And when you hear about a young drummer, whether it be a guy or a girl, you know, because today a lot of female drumming, if they're worth presenting, and you hear a lot from the companies and from everybody, hey, you should see her play, you should see him play, then you say, well, there's something there. You try it.
Yes.
You say, let's go ahead with it, you know.
Yeah.
The big stars today, well, I think that our biggest name this year is Steve Smith. Steve Smith in Montreal, we had him 5 times, 5 different festivals. He's very versatile. And they call Steve the eternal student because he's got something new to present.
Okay.
And he's just off at Journey. He's the drummer of Journey. And they're just finishing their world tour just in September, you know. So we've got Steve coming with an organ, a B3 organ trio, which is very different coming from him, with 2 top musicians, you know. And so that's worth seeing right there. We have Tony Bennett's drummer, Clayton Cameron. Tony Bennett, who we all know, he's still singing today at the age of 80-something, you know. His drummer for about 30 years was Clayton.
Nice.
And Clayton is a master of brushes. And, you know, just to show you that you have to leave a very rock and roll act, you know, and then come into brushes, you know, and show that exists too. Because a lot of people, a lot of youngsters, they say, well, we never played brushes before. But this guy's the best. And he'll even do tap dancers on his snare drum, you know.
Yeah,
so all the old tap dancers, he's going to do that.
Yeah, cool.
And so he's one of them. We also have the most in-demand female drummer in the world right now is Annika Niles.
Yes.
She's from Germany, and she's turning heads everywhere.
Definitely.
Not only because she's a beautiful girl, she's talented.
And focused.
Focused, you can't imagine. You know, I mean, everybody wants to see her because she doesn't do all those tricks, you know, like the stick twirling and everything. She doesn't have to do it, you know. But what she does on the drums is tasty. We call that tasty in the drumming world. And she's taken, you know, fills that Jeff Porcaro, that used to play with Toto, he was Toto's drummer, and taking fills from different drummers like that and adding things to them. And you know, before you add something to something that's already good, you have to know what you're doing. So that's what she does.
She made it her own,
Yeah.
Making her own.
And on the Quebec side, we have our international artist, who is Emmanuel Caplet.
Yes, the sweet Emmanuel.
And Emmanuel is a great drummer, a great person, and she's toured the world. You know, she's in demand everywhere. You know,
she's a
festivals.
hard worker. She's very
dedicated.
Yep.
You know, 100%. You know, so I know Emmanuel since she was a student. You know, in Drummondville. You know, I know her teacher. That's how old I am. I know them all when they were students and so on.
Yeah.
A little joke. So, and then that brings us to, you know, you have to please, Quebec is rock city. So you have to please the rockers as well. You can't have the whole weekend full of rockers, because then people will leave. Some people will leave, some people will stay. So we have Korn's drummer, Ray Luzi.
Yes.
And he's a monster player. And he's playing with Pearl drums, you know, and he's up there on Sunday, you know, the second last show. Just before Annika, it's Russ Miller. Russ Miller is a legend drummer. He's on just about something like 1,000 recordings of big stars. You know, I can't name them all. There's just too many. You know, and he's an educator. And we like to present the drummers that can give tips. You know, give advice to the audience a little bit earlier during the day. Because when you get to the last show, you don't have any more brain. You know, your brain doesn't work as well. So it has to be entertaining.
You get a little saturated.
You're saturated. That's the word.
Yes.
You know?
Information.
And starting with me, you know, when I see the last show coming along, I said, shoot. You know, but, and then I have my list here because I don't like, we have François La Liberté, who's from Montreal.
Yes.
He lives in Montreal. He's coming with a trio. He's going to surprise a lot of people. He's a great drummer. We have Olivier Savoie-Campeau, who's a new kid on the block and all the new types of music. You know, he was unknown to me about 3 or 4 years ago, but he's a young guy, and he's going to be able to give something to the public. You know, he's so good.
Yeah.
On the Roland V drum side, we have the best that Roland's seen ever. It's a Belgian drummer from Michael Shack.
Michael Shack?
He's starting the show.
Okay, he's the first
When you see Michael Shack play there, you're just going to crawl out of the audience. Oh. So that's how good it is.
Oh, awesome.
So it's I encourage everybody to be there at 11 o'clock in the morning. You know?
And that's on the Saturday and Sunday. It's on the Saturday and the Sunday, so it's 2 days also. So I just want to make sure
the show, in reality, the whole festival is from 11 o'clock in the morning to 7:30 at night, p.m., of course. And because then it's a weekend, you know, and some drummers have gigs, you know, others they want to go out to eat, you know, and so on. So we do it in the afternoon, you know, so it makes
smart.
more sense, you know. And but then we have an all-star Yamaha. They have an all-star trio, Daphnis Prieto, who I think and a lot of people think is the best Cuban drummer we've ever seen. He's just going to knock everybody out by his thinking. And full band, you know, 5-piece band, great musicians from Toronto. And then we have a Portuguese drummer that's playing on the same stage with him.
With him? Okay.
They'll be separate and then together at the end. And a young drummer from Toronto, Sarah Thayer.
Okay.
And she's Indian descent, you know, from India.
India, yeah.
So she's got all the rhythms, you know, the funky rhythms, and she adds all the rhythms of India, you know, so you've got a beautiful mix of three drummers
colorful,
there.
yeah.
Very colorful,
yeah,
you know?
Nice.
So, and I'm missing out on a couple of good ones here. Paul DeLong. Paul DeLong is a Canadian legend.
Paul DeLong.
And Paul DeLong was he was Kim Mitchell's main drummer in the 80s, and Paul. With no exaggeration, and one of our best drummers in Canada. you know, and he's playing on Sunday. But he's got a 5-piece band, and he's going to be playing all the prog tunes, all the best prog tunes with his band from the 70s and 80s.
Okay,
you know,
nice.
all the best, you know, the groups that we love, you know. So, and I can't. There's Sonny Tremblay. You'll never see a guy twirling sticks like him. He's from Gatineau near Ottawa. So Sonny Tremblay, just seeing him, you know, on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock.
That's what wake you up with this.
He's crazy drummer, and I saw him as a kid coming to Drumfest in Montreal and asking me, Ralph, how do I get to play Drumfest?
Oh,
and he was 12 years old,
and, you know. And now here he is, and you're giving him the chance.
Now it's 10 years later, you know.
That's so sweet. I love stories like
that. You know,
that.
so it's, but you know. And to finish our festival, of course, we have Stevie Wonder's percussionist and another Cuban drummer that's playing with him, you know.
This is going to be absolutely amazing, guys. This is serious.
The trio that ends our festival, it's murder. It's a combination of funk, jazz, rock, name it, you know.
Okay. And the name of the trio is?
Joey Heredia. It's El Trio.
El Trio, okay.
Joey Heredia, Marco Mendoza, who's the bass player for Dead Daisies, a big rock group today. And Renato Neto is a Brazilian keyboard player. And he, until Prince died, he was 12 to 13 years with Prince.
Okay.
When you see Prince on stage the last 13 years,
he's the one accompanying. Oh,
he's a monster keyboard player, you know.
Okay.
All the programming and everything, you know.
So
that's I don't know. I don't think I forgot anybody.
I think that we're going. Anyway, there's going to be a list of. I'll leave you guys the whole list and the link to Ralph's page, Facebook page. It will be held at the Palais Montcalm. October 21st and 22nd, and I will leave you guys the links below so that you can go and get some tickets. There are still tickets available, right?
There are tickets available. They're selling fast compared to last year. We've doubled the number of tickets sold at the same time. You know, like 40 days before the festival. So there's no more tickets in the front rows, but you can see it, you see well anywhere in that venue.
Yes.
And we've opened up the second floor of the Corbeille, they call the balcony and everything. We didn't have that open last year.
Yeah, you didn't have that last year, but you know what? You guys are going to end up having to get a bigger place because next year is going to be even bigger.
Well, we all wish, but
we'll be standing on top of each other.
I'd be satisfied just with this one full, you know, and you know, 'cause it's a lot of drummers. You know, you have to attract a lot of drummers.
This is going to be an amazing festival. I left this festival last year saying, okay, I can't wait for next year. And all I kept thinking is, I can't wait for next year. So I told you I would be there, and I am going to be there. It is definite. And I want to thank you for being here with us and for talking about all of your beautiful, of your life, talking about all kinds of stuff that has been going on in your very interesting and busy life. And so guys, thank you for watching. And I guess I will see you guys in another 2 weeks for another episode of Drumshare News. Love you. Bye.